of us come to Al-Anon for help as a last resort. We tried everything else. Perhaps we've seen its effects on others. It seems to have worked like magic, and we want some of that magic. Then we find out that it isn't magic. It's a kind of spiritual common sense, that we must buckle down and learn. We start like children in first grade with the first step. Admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. The second part of the step is easy to admit, but it's the first part that we usually only give lip service to. We find it difficult to surrender the idea that we, the competent ones who have tried to cope with an alcoholic situation, don't really know how to handle it correctly. Today's reminder. Step 1 must be learned and repeated until it becomes a part of me. Whenever I give in to my natural impulse and habit to take over and try to force a change, I'm in trouble again. I know I can only make progress when I really believe in and practice this first step. The quote on a tribute to the quote reads, I pray to be released from my compulsion to control my situation. I have so often proved I am unable to control it. Let me think, know, and feel my powerlessness, that I will at least learn to let go and let God. That I will at least learn to let go and let God. Released from my compulsion to control my situation. I have so often proved that I am unable to control it. Let me think, know, and feel my powerlessness. Then I will at least learn to let go and let God. Taking the first step is not a matter of reading the words, admitted we were powerless, but of impressing them so deeply on our consciousness that the admitting will be established as part of our way of thinking and feeling. We may read and repeat this step hundreds of times and still fail to use it in the ways we think and act. If we really accept the fact that we have no authority or power over any other human being, we would not try to compel the drinker to do what we want him to do. Have I attained this frame of mind? Can I make myself let go of the problem? Today's reminder. I will look back upon all the things I've done to make the alcoholic stop drinking. Has it produced one iota of improvement to scold, to weep, complain, accuse, reason, appeal, or threaten? Am I any better off today for indulging in these futile gestures? Is the drinker any closer to sobriety? Or is the situation worse? The quote reads, I pray for the wisdom to realize that progress begins only when I am ready to detach myself from the idea that I alone can control and solve another's problems. Once more with the quote, I pray for the wisdom to realize that progress begins only when I am ready to detach myself from the idea that I alone can control and solve another's problem. first step is a clear and ringing statement of our true status in the alcoholic situation. It should leave no doubt in our minds as to just where we stand. Reading the first half, admitting we are powerless over alcohol, might generate instant resistance in our minds. The automatic response might be, "Not me, I'm not powerless, I'll fix this." But the step goes on to say, our lives have become unmanageable. This challenge denies that we are able to fix anything. For haven't we ourselves demonstrated beyond any doubt that we have not been competent to manage our own lives? Today's reminder. The first step is by no means a statement of despair. It merely points out our human limitations. It prepares us to become humble so we can find the spiritual answers that will place our lives on an entirely different plane. It is preparing us for deliverance from problems we cannot cope with alone. The quote reads, Let not my stubborn self-will stand in the way of my achieving serenity. Before I can accomplish anything, I must accept my need for help." Today's reminder, the first step is by no means a statement of despair. It merely points out our human limitations. It prepares us to become humble so we can find the spiritual answers that will place our lives on an entirely different plane. It is preparing us for deliverance from problems we cannot cope with alone. And the quote again, let not my stubborn self-will stand in the way of my achieving serenity. Before I can accomplish anything, I must accept my need for help. Why is it so hard to admit we are powerless over alcohol, as the first step suggests we do? All of us have heard and shared in discussions at meetings as to whether this should be interpreted as alcohol or the alcoholic. We have no power over either one. No one can control the insidious effects of alcohol or its power to destroy the graces and decencies of life. No one can control the alcoholic's compulsion to drink. But we do have a power derived from God, and that is the power to change our own lives. Acceptance does not mean submission to a degrading situation. It means accepting the facts of a situation and then deciding what we will do about it. Today's reminder. Progress begins when we stop trying to control the uncontrollable, and when we go on to correct what we have the right to change. If we accept a situation full of misery and uncertainty, it is no one's fault but our own. If we accept a situation full of misery and uncertainty, it is no one's fault but our own. We can do something about that. We can do something about that. And the quote, "Fighting futility is just a waste of energy. Samantha, either do something or quit fretting." Celebra Tueli. Only the alcoholic can set himself free from the compulsion to drink. The non-alcoholic cannot force him to want sobriety, although many of us feel we should be able to correct a situation that is causing us so much suffering. Yet the more I try to force the issue with tears, reproaches, and threats, the worse it gets. Al-Anon can help me to cope with the situation in an entirely different way by showing me how to recognize and correct my mistaken attempts to force a solution. The same philosophy applies to the problems we face after the long-desired sobriety has come to pass. Today's reminder: I am powerless over alcohol and its effects on another person. I cannot make him sober no more than I can be responsible for his drinking, for what he does drink. The first step tells me this, and it tells me also that I must acknowledge that my life has become unmanageable. My first task is to manage my own life, whether or not the alcoholic is still drinking. My first task is to manage my own life, whether or not the alcoholic is still drinking. And the quote, it's a prayer. The prayer reads, "Help me to find peace of mind within myself by uniting myself with God's power and guidance. That is the spiritual way out of my difficulties, the only sure way." Be patient. A longtime Al-Anon friend, his name is, not Al-Anon, AA friend, Dr. Harry M. Tebow, T-I-E-B-O-U-T, longtime AA friend, Dr. Tebow, clarified brilliantly the difference between submission and the surrender idea, which is implied in step 1 of the 12 steps. In submission, he wrote, an individual accepts reality consciously, but not unconsciously. He accepts it consciously, but not unconsciously. He accepts as a practical fact that he can't, at the moment, conquer reality. But lurking in his unconscious is the feeling that there'll come a day, presumably where he'll be able to conquer reality. This is no real acceptance. The struggle is still going on. With this temporary yielding, tension continues. But when the ability to accept functions on the unconscious level as surrender, there is no residual battle. There is relaxation and freedom from strain and conflict. Today's reminder: Al-Anon tells me that the complete acceptance of my powerlessness to change the alcoholic can indeed create a new life for me. When I really let go and stop playing God, things will begin to happen. Because at that point, my higher power has an opportunity to correct what seemed to me so hopeless. And here's the quote. This quote is from the doctor himself, Dr. Harry M. Tebow. This is a quote he reads. It reads, "Acceptance appears to be a state of mind in which the individual accepts rather than rejects or resists. He is able to take things in, to go along with, to cooperate, and be receptive." And the quote one more time: "Acceptance appears to be a state of mind in which the individual accepts rather than rejects or resists. He's able to take things in, to go along with, to cooperate, and be receptive." The 12 steps, the 12 simple words of the first step embrace a whole philosophy of life. Books could be written on the subject of personal surrender, suggested by the first 6 words. Admitted we were powerless over alcohol. The next 6 represent our acknowledgement that we have not yet learned to handle our affairs wisely, that our lives had become unmanageable. The first step prepares us for a whole new life, which we can achieve only by letting go of what we cannot control, and by undertaking, a day at a time, the monumental task of setting our world in order through a change in our own thinking. Today's reminder: I will apply the wisdom of the first step not only to my relations with the alcoholic, but to all the people and happenings in my life. I will not attempt to manage or control what is clearly beyond my powers. I will dedicate myself to managing my own life and only mine. The quote, short, four lines. There's only one corner of the world you can be sure of improvement, and that is your own self. Pardon the indigestion there. There is only one corner of the world you can be sure of improving, and that is your own self. Okay. When we come into Al-Anon, our main preoccupation is the alcoholism of someone who is important in our lives. Step 1 says, admitted we are powerless over alcohol. We must sooner or later accept the fact that we have no way to stop the compulsion to drink. The desire for sobriety can come only from the alcoholic. We may guide or inspire by our example, but we cannot cast another person, however close to us, into the mold that we choose. The second part of step 2 is easier to accept. Our lives have become unmanageable. This we know. What we may not know at this point is what to do about it. Today's reminder: I understand that the first step demands that I surrender the reins of control over another human being. It reminds me that my life has become unmanageable. My first task is to set it in order, to set my life in order. If I earnestly want to manage my life, I will have no time to manage anyone else's. This quote reads, unattributed quote reads, the first step suggests a radical change in me, in my way of thinking about the alcoholic and my attitudes towards him and his illness. Old destructive habit patterns must be replaced. Old destructive habit patterns must be replaced. The first step suggests a radical change in me, in my way of thinking about the alcoholic and my attitudes towards him and his illness. Old destructive habit patterns must be replaced. And there's one line I like. I understand that the first step demands that I surrender the reins of control over other human beings. It reminds me that my life has become unmanageable. My first task is to set that in order. If I earnestly want to manage my life, I will have no time to manage anyone else's.